Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Today we have 3 brand new stories. Let's start with HOA Revenge Story. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. The HOA doesn't like my project car. Yesterday, I received a letter from the Homeowners Association informing me that I'm not in compliance of the strictly enforced by towing restriction, stating that vehicles may not be parked on the street overnight. In the letter was a picture of my project car, old BMW, parked beside our house on the street. I decided to look up the HOA's restrictions, which I haven't seen before since I'm a renter, and discovered I'm living in HOA hell. The street parking rule is just the beginning of a long list of restrictions, including one warranting a hefty fine for leaving the garage door open when not in use. This came as a huge surprise since several of my neighbors have parked their cars on the street without problem since I lived here, so I assumed it was okay. I can only imagine that they've singled me out because my car is 30 years old. However, in my defense, it's very presentable and by no means junky. Being singled out made me incredibly frustrated to the point where I started doing legal research. It turns out my HOA has every right to tow my project car since it's parked on a private street in the neighborhood. The good news for me is that the street just outside of the neighborhood is public and it's 100% legal to park on it for any amount of time. Unfortunately for the HOA, the closest section of public street to my rental house is right in front of their nice gated entrance. Ironically, my old BMW has now become part of their image, and there's nothing they can do about it until I move out in a few months. And our second story. Kiss your promotion goodbye. Years ago, I was an assistant director for a center of a pretty prominent preschool chain. It was my first time being promoted to a management position from being a teacher for many years, so it took me a few months to get into the swing of things. During this time, a particular teacher at the center took it upon herself to highlight every little thing I forgot or didn't distribute in time, barricading herself in the director's office almost daily with complaints. She also spread false rumors about my partying on the weekends to other teachers, trying to paint me out to be an unprofessional fool while continuing to be sugary sweet to my face the entire time. This I really took issue with because I take my job very seriously. I was too unconfrontational of a person to directly address her, which I regret now in hindsight. I had to oversee graduations that year and spent many long nights hand-preparing decor, creating the slideshow, etc. In the aftermath, she told the director that I didn't lift a finger. After a very lengthy conversation with my director, she told me that she was starting to see that this teacher probably wanted my job, so she was trying to poke holes in my job performance. Fast forward a year, and I've hit my stride with my job. The owners of my school decided to open a second center, which meant they needed to hire a new management team for that school. After they hired the new director, they decided to hold internal interviews for an assistant director. The owner, my director, and the new director asked me to sit in on the interviews since I would be the one training them in their role, which would mirror mine. Guess who walks through the door as the second interview? I wish I could have taken a picture of the look on her face when she saw me in her panel interview. The new director and owner liked her in the interview, but listened to my suggestion that she wasn't ready for a management position and hired someone that I recommended, whom I ended up getting along really well with. I left that school for a director position several years ago, but last I heard, she still hasn't made it into a management position. And our last story. Letting agent tried to screw me, my landlord, and flatmates. My story starts around this time last year. My flatmates and I had signed a lease with the town's biggest letting agent the November before to secure a large flat for the academic year. Most of us had lived together the academic year before in halls-type accommodations, and we were looking forward to having somewhere that we could call home for a year and that was a bit less sterile. Anyway, we'd recently left our previous accommodation and were in all corners of the country when one of us spotted a post on a big local Facebook group asking the next tenants of this flat, us, to contact them. As it turns out, the letting agency, which we'll call Ailing Letting Agency, ALA, owed our landlords tens of thousands of pounds of rent. The students had paid it to ALA, who managed the property, but the landlord hadn't seen most of it. The landlord, who we'll call Super Landlord, SL, informs us that he's going to be repossessing the flat from ALA, but reassures us that we have somewhere to live and we can sign a contract with him. As it turns out, I'm due to visit the town that the property is in a week or two after. It gets to go before the day I visit, and the landlord has changed the locks. But we haven't heard a peep from the letting agent. At this point, we didn't know who to trust, so we waited to see if ALA got in contact with us and kept quiet. I walk to the flat and see that indeed there's a notice saying the property has been taken back, so I decide to pay ALA a visit and act dumb. I go into ALA and meet the director. Let's call him Creepy Boss Man, CB. I mention that I was in town and saw the flat had been repossessed, and CB tells me that it's been taken illegally and he's going to take SL to court to get it back within a few days. I ask why it was taken in the first place, and I get a blustery answer where the question was ultimately avoided. Anyway, I'm assured the property will be in ALA's hands within a few days. I ask CB what would happen if by some miracle he quoted 1 in 10,000 chance ALA didn't get the property back. I was told that fine, we can sign with SL. A few weeks go by and the property is still safely in SL's hands. SL is completely honest with us and keeps us regularly updated. We have concerns about signing 2 contracts, so he says we can sign with him on the day we move in, and if we want to find somewhere else, he'll understand. We hear about some of the stuff CB getting up to as well. When SL retook the property, he was surprised to see that there were people in there who weren't the current tenants. Turns out the rooms had been double rented over the holidays. ALA had also used money given to buy furniture and merely leased it, meaning SL had to shell out to actually buy it all. It gets to 3 days before we're about to move in. An email pops up. It's from CB. He tells us that ALA doesn't have the property due to the illegal actions of SL. He can, however, provide us with another 2 properties, which would break our group up. We're in worse location and look like crap compared to our current one. I talk to my flatmates and I send him, on behalf of everyone, a very short email to let him know that we consider our contract terminated. CB quickly sends a chain of emails, none of which I reply to, firstly claiming it would be illegal for us to move in, then asking why I won't reply, then asking if he could speak to our parents. The effing cheek of it. As if it's not bad enough, firstly lying to us, then trying to scare us so we get screwed out of a property we signed for. But that isn't the last of revenge-worthy actions of CB. Me and another flatmate move in the day the tenancy is supposed to start without letting CB know. It's very hard to evict someone once they're in a house, and we were still erring on the side of caution. The day after we move in, we give CB a surprise visit to ask for our deposits back. He's still adamant that he's going to get the property back within a few days, and that giving us back our deposits would be an admission of guilt. We strongly argue that the contract has been violated and terminated. He doesn't budge. This goes on for a few weeks, and we get the same blustery answers every time we go in. This guy is not planning to pay our deposits ever. So to recap, CB has tried to screw us all out of a house, has constantly lied and withheld information, and is trying to screw us out of our deposits. Time for revenge. If he's going to try and screw us out of money, we might as well have a go at letting him lose as much money as possible. Disquiet among the other landlords and students is growing, and banners denouncing ALA and CB are being hung up on roundabouts and houses around town. I make a couple of inquiries with the CAB and find out the deposit is illegally held. It should be in a scheme, so even without the whole break of contract thing, it's illegal. And that means every student who's renting from ALA is entitled to their deposit back. Of course, the contract is worded to try and say it's not a deposit, but it most certainly is. I make the SU aware of this and unfortunately are about as much use as a chocolate teapot. They won't do anything in case they get sued by ALA. Not to worry, the local notice board on Facebook has about 13,000 members, most of them students, and I make a post asking if anyone is having trouble with ALA and revealing some of their troubles. As it turns out, there are quite a few others who were affected, many with worse things to say than I have. I like to think it put a few people off going with ALA. Anyway, shortly after, I get a golden call. It's a producer from the BBC. SL has been in contact with them, and they wanted to hear how students had been affected. Now, of course, me and my flatmates were more than happy to oblige. I kept in regular contact with the producer guy, PG. During this time, I'm regularly giving CB surprise visits to ask for my deposit back. I know it's not happening, but I'm having fun being able to vent and call him a liar to his face and calling him out on all his bullcrap he tried to pull on us. He seems to get more and more irate as time goes on and rumors spread about ALA's predicament. It appears to be going into liquidation. PG is pretty quiet about the show he works for and makes sure in the last couple of weeks that we don't give anything away to suspect that the BBC are investigating CB. It was glorious. There's hidden camera footage of him shouting at some old lady, his lower shirt buttons are undone, and he's saying things which are quoted for months after. Think of David Brent's lines mixed with Gollum's anger and hissing. The show does a sting in a prospective house, the camera and presenter come out, and he runs away. I had calls from family saying CB was unbelievable. Now was the time to put in the final kick while he was down. I'm sure many of you are wondering why we didn't just take CB to court. We initially were unsure to how solid a case was. CB was intimidating, and we didn't want to press until we had a watertight case. Then the BBC thing came along, and we decided to wait. The morning after the show aired, I visited CB. The staff were saying how bad it was while I was waiting. I go in, and CB isn't particularly happy with me. Obviously, he'd seen me and my flatmates on the show. I asked him one last time for the deposits, and he relented, so I served him with a letter threatening to take him to court in 2 weeks if he didn't pay up. He has a read, and he's getting visibly more angry. He says, "That's very good for a student," and regrettably, I lose it, laying into him, trying to incorporate as many of the previous night's quotes as I could. He tells me to get out, and as I'm passing one of his staff, I say, "Your boss is a goon." They wholeheartedly agree with me. 2 weeks later, we got all our money back as a gesture of goodwill. The first beer I bought with that tasted so good. The company folded soon after and is now trading as something else. But it's well known that CB is a scumbag, and everyone knows to avoid the new company. Hopefully it won't last long. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.